Coming up on the next episode of Painting and Travel, Roger and Sarah Bansemer visit the coast of Maine. Sarah meets a fourth-generation lobsterman, and Roger paints the harbor in the morning light.
Today, Sarah and I are in Cape Porpoise, Maine. It's a beautiful little fishing community, a lot of lobstering, a lot of fishing boats here. But I've chosen this subject in the background because it's very typical of what I think of as Maine. We've got some lobster boats back there and a nice house on the rocks. So I've got acrylic paints today. I'm using a limited palette, and I'm going to get started right now. I came down on the dock just a bit earlier and sketched my drawing in here in charcoal. I'm using an 1/8" masonite board, primed in gesso, and I have it covered with a thin coat of burnt sienna. That gives me a nice warm ground to start with. And I know this scene is all pretty much blue, but I like some of this warmth to maybe show through the painting, and we'll see what happens with that. For my paints, I'm using titanium white, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, Indian yellow, and alizarin crimson. I usually start out with my dark colors, so maybe I will do that now. Just naturally picked up white here. I'll start out with those darks in the background. This limited palette, I don't have much to choose from, but that's often a real benefit for me because by using a limited palette, I can sometimes keep much more harmony within my painting than I can by adding a lot of other colors. I did choose to put two blues out on my palette today, the cerulean blue and the ultramarine blue, simply because there's so much beautiful blue sky, and it really is a very cerulean blue color here, which is a cooler color, and then the water, which is a warmer color. So the ultramarine blue being a warmer color, probably use that more for the water, and the cerulean blue for the sky. But right now I'm just going to put in some of these dark colors in the background where this tree line is. Oh, I love the way that goes up on the hill there. Paintings always go quickly at first. Very important to get a good composition to start with. And compositions don't always work out like I hope they would. Sometimes I think I have a good composition drawn on my board, and then as I get into it, I find that it's not. But I think this one will work out pretty well. Now these rocks down here by the water, they're a lot warmer in color. The sun's coming up now. It's pretty early in the morning, so we get some real warmth to the look of the landscape right at this point. And I'll drop in that house. I'm using a pretty good sized brush here to start with because I don't want to get hung up in details right off the bat. You know, I want to get my big, broad shapes in here. Now that house is still in shadow because the sun hasn't come up. So I'm going to make that very cool to begin with. As the sun comes up, maybe there'll be a patch of light come across this house right here. Then I can make that a little bit warmer. And that roof, of course, is a shingle roof, so it's going to be warmer to begin with here. It's a sort of a brownish color.
Has been a fisherman and a lobsterman in particular for how many years?
I've been doing it since I was 9 years old.
And how do you learn to do the lobstering?
It's a fourth generation.
Fourth generation?
Yeah. And when I was 9 years old, I used to fish 10 traps up through here. take my father's rowboat and go out, haul them up.
What's the biggest one you've ever found?
Oh, the big ones you gotta throw back. You can't keep them.
Are they old?
Oh yeah.
How old?
Oh, some could be 50 to 70 years old.
Really?
Yep.
And weigh what? 30 pounds?
No, not quite that much.
Not quite that much.
Maybe 15, something like that.
And so when you go out fairly early. And how far out in this bay do you go?
Well, I'm up at 4:30 and I'm down here at 5. And I just go fishing along the islands with this here. This little boat I got here. That one over there, there's a bigger one, 40-footer.
Oh, yes, I see it.
Sea Spray.
Yes.
I go off outside in the winter months. In the fall of the year, I probably go, most furthest I go is 12, 14 miles, no further than that.
So you can fish year round.
Oh yeah, I go year round.
But the lobstering's best in summer or winter?
Well, in the fall of the year is when they really start to shed pretty good outside there. And, yeah, I got a big family that fishes down here.
And do you always go to your same spots, or how do you determine?
Pretty much.
You have the sweet spots where you have had good luck in the past, and then you go back there?
Yeah. Well, after a while, you're doing so many years, you can figure it out after a while.
Yes. And you have a crew of one?
Well, I do here, yeah. In the fall of the year, I may pick up another guy.
And you bait the traps with?
Various different kinds of bait. You know, it could be herring, flounder X, could be pollock, pogies, redfish, you name it.
And then you sell the lobsters directly to restaurants?
I sell the lobsters to my brother.
Oh, that's nice of you.
Yeah, he owns that lobster car out there. He's got a bunch of fishermen, and that's his restaurant right there, him and his wife.
I see. And then the lobster car, that's news to me. How does that work?
Well, you come in and you weigh your lobsters up, and they put them in crates, and at the end of the day, they bring them in, and he backs his truck down, and he takes them wherever he wants to go.
So people around this area, when they go to a restaurant, they're really eating very fresh lobster.
You're eating about as fresh as you don't get no fresher than this, you know. It's a hard way to make a living, but, you know, I love it, and I wouldn't want to do anything different.
Just behind us, there's a beautiful little lighthouse on Goat Island. It's called Goat Island Lighthouse. And yesterday I sat up just about sunset and did this painting of these rocks. And again, the light changed always so quickly. I have a good feeling about this painting. It's exciting to be somewhere new, fresh in Maine. I have done other paintings in Maine, and I have done other paintings of the lobster boats. Here's one of them here that I did some time back. And this painting here is one I did of a lobster shack. It was done in the winter. You can see some of the ruts in the road. It was a very interesting piece to do. But there's nothing like painting out on location live here. I'll just drop that roof of that house on. I like the nice little severe shapes. You know, to me, Maine is sort of a no-nonsense state. I mean, so these nice hard shapes really kind of suit the attitude that I kind of feel about being here. Well, let me see. I guess I'll work on the sky now. Mix up some of that cerulean blue with white, and I'm going to put a little Indian yellow in that. And I know that's going to make it a little bit green, but that's kind of the way I see that here. I'm using quite a bit of paint when I do this sky because often acrylics don't cover very well on the first go around. So I'm trying to get this thick enough in the sky where I don't have to go over it a second time. I do have a few clouds in the sky now, and they're very much warmer. And of course, up in the zenith, it gets cooler and cooler as the sky goes up. But I can't see much of that up there, so I'm going to keep this quite warm down in here. Now, when that dries, I think I'm going to add some clouds in the sky. And that's because there's a lot of area up here which doesn't really say too much, and so I may add some clouds in there for interest. Although, on the other hand, I don't want to compete with all the texture that's going to be going on down here, so we'll see about that. I've got my spray atomizer here. It's going to keep my paints wet. It's kind of windy out here this morning, so these paints are going to dry rather quickly. I think I'm going to paint the water as one big area to start with, and I may just not even worry about the boats at this point. And I'm not going to put all those boats in. I'm just going to put a few in back here. But right now, I'm just, oh, that's way too blue. So let's cut that down with some red and yellow to make it grayer. A lot of paintings get killed because there's too much color in a painting. I know it's easy to get colors muddy, especially if you're working with oils, but more often than not, a good painting will have a lot more grays in it than it will have a lot of color in it. So I'm going to keep this a little bit on the gray side. And once again, my intention is just to cover these big areas, and after I do that, I can attack some of the small details, which really gets to be fun at that point. You got to get these big areas in here first. This has changed dramatically since I was here earlier setting up, because earlier it was very calm and there were very few ripples on the water, and I could see beautiful reflections coming down off from the house onto the water. And that's one thing that attracted me to this location and to this scene. And even across here, I could see some of the reflection down of the trees and the houses in the water. Now all that's gone because the wind has stirred up this and it's eliminated that. But I remember what that was like. So I think I'm going to stay with my original thoughts on this and probably put some nice reflections down here of those houses. Otherwise, it gets kind of just pretty nondescript down here, pretty bland. Okay, I'm going to squint my eyes as I always do, and I look at my painting and I look at the scene and I try and determine if the values are correct. And they're not quite where I want them, but in the interest of time, I don't think I'm going to make too many big changes right now. I'm going to start in on some of the smaller areas. Painting is always a situation where it evolves from minute to minute. And of course, the atmosphere, the light, everything, all that changes from minute to minute too. So if my values are off just a little bit, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm mainly concerned with the painting itself. If it looks good as a painting, then I'll go with that. We have a number of boats out here, and most of them have white hulls on them. And this one boat I'm looking at here has a bright white hull, but the front end of that is in shadow right now, so it is actually darker than the water. So I'm going to make the front part of this dark. This little dock sometimes shakes a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit hard just to get a straight line. I love sitting out here. This is just really wonderful. Then as it goes back, it starts to catch the light. So since it's catching a light, that's going to be warmer. So I'm putting a little bit of yellow in my white there, and I still have some of that gray color on my brush. Earlier this morning, there was a lot of activity around this dock. All the lobstermen were coming down, getting in their boats, and going out to try and get their catch for the day. I wanted to paint one of these lobster boats, and I had actually done a sketch of it. And then the fisherman came with his rowboat, went out to it, and left. So that's one reason. Another reason I decided to do this scene here is because I knew that house wasn't going to move. It's time to pick up a smaller brush, and I'm going to drop in some of these houses in the background, and I'm just going to suggest those. I have a gray piece of paper on my palette here, and when I mix my colors, I can tell very easily whether I'm lighter than middle tone or darker than middle tone. You can see this here, that's lighter than middle tone gray, and this is just a little bit darker. So it makes it almost like a little guide for me as to where the values of my colors stand. Some of these houses are white, some of them are a gray color, and I'm not trying to accurately catch the shape of each of these houses. Just trying to give myself an impression of what they are back there, but mainly I'm trying to get a little bit of atmosphere between myself and those houses back there, so I'm keeping these values a bit close. There's going to be more contrast on things in the foreground and less contrast with these items in the background. I'm waiting for that light to come across that house there, that house that seems to be the focal point of this painting. So I'm going to concentrate on that some and leave a lot of this, the imagination right now. Back in the studio, I'll work on this more, but I want to get as accurately as I can what I'm seeing on this house, because it just seems to be the most beautiful part of this scene. I have a little chimney coming up right in the middle of this house. Now that gives me the chance to make a nice shadow across the roof. I may have to make the roof lighter in order for that shadow to show up. Yep, I will. So let's mix up a little bit lighter color for this roof. As I said earlier, painting is all about adjusting things all the time. So here we go. We'll make this roof a little bit lighter. I don't want to make it too light though. It's really a balancing act. There, that's maybe a little bit better value. There's some beautiful gulls here. They're very big, beautiful animals. Alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, a little bit of yellow, and I'll just make a dark color as I can. There's that shadow. That's what I was looking for. I'm going to grab one more color now, cadmium yellow light. Put a little bit of that on. I don't need much, but I will use that cadmium yellow light to make some of these brilliant greens that I see in here that are starting to come across right in front of this house. And I'll mix that with a little cerulean blue. I could mix it with ultramarine blue, but it makes a nice, bright, brilliant green. And that sun comes right across there. And there's another smaller house in the front here, and there's some light starting to creep across their lawn too. We have a beautiful pine tree right on the side of this house, and I'll just make this trunk down there, and then just with the flat of my brush create that tree. Those are very easy to make. Those trees are just fun to make that way. Probably the darkest part of my painting will be right down in here, so I'm going to take my alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and I'm just going to make a purple color. I'm going to put the purple right down here, and in a few moments when that dries, I can scumble some green over the top of that purple, and some of that warm color will show through. I'm just taking that same pot of gray color, mixing it with a little bit of white. I'll indicate some of these big large boulders. I'm spraying this board right down here, and as I said earlier, I could see some beautiful reflections of these houses there. So I'm just going to indicate those right now before I forget. Well, first I'll have to put in the reflection from the rocks though, won't I? By spraying that, it helps my acrylics flow much easier over these dry acrylics. Now at this point, there's not any real use in calling myself a plein air painter because I'm not painting what I'm seeing anymore, but painting what I remembered here maybe an hour ago when I first walked down here to look at this scene. So I'm kind of guessing really at what this looked like. Now the reflection of the house is going to show up more than the reflection of the roof, because the roof is facing back and it wouldn't reflect quite as much as the house itself. But I will indicate a little bit of that roof in here too. Take a brush and then just drag it across there. Seems to be getting a little bit overcast here. The light changes so fast outside. So we get some very high clouds up here, and they're very gray. I'm going to indicate a few of those, but I'm going to keep them about the same value as that blue sky. Well, I got down the basics of what I want here. I think I got a good start on this painting. I've got some reference photos I took earlier. Let's take it back to the studio now and finish it. Sarah and I have arrived back in our St. Augustine, Florida studio, and I've downloaded my photographs to my laptop computer over here to my right so I can view my photographs that I took while we were in Maine. Another method would be to print the photographs on some photo paper, but I can't get as many good colors. I can't get really the details I can by printing out a photograph. So I rather view it on my monitor. And of course, another device that's really handy to use is a tablet. You get a good luminescence, get a great picture on these large tablets, can zoom in and out, and you can have this right by your easel so you can reference your photograph while painting. Well, I didn't get as much done out in the field as I thought I would with this painting, so I'm just going to go over it almost from the start again and just reorganize things here. I'll keep the placement of all these objects, but I'll just define everything a little bit better. I'm using the same colors here basically for the sky, white with my cerulean blue. I often pick up enough paint on my brush and don't even mix it. I'll actually mix the paints right on the board itself. And down here towards the horizon, I'm going to pick up my yellow ochre because I want this to be warmer and somewhat lighter down here by the horizon. Right now these trees look too dark to me. Don't have enough atmosphere between me and these trees back here, so I'm going to add some cerulean blue and a little more yellow ochre to try and push these in the distance. This is where it's good to work in the studio because I'm not looking, although I'm looking at my photographs, I'm not looking at the real life scene anymore, and I can make these artistic judgments that it's sometimes very hard to make out in the field when I'm looking at the real thing. And I'm going to blend these two areas together so this gives me a nice soft edge back here. Since this large tree is breaking the light coming across this house, I'm going to make some small patterns here just to indicate that this tree is breaking up that light source. If there's light coming in this area here, there'll also be light on the roof of the house. So I'll make some lighter, warmer colors, maybe with my alizarin crimson and yellow ochre. But I'll leave that area right there to show a shadow on the roof. Putting some dark green here, just so this dark green in this area, so the viewer will understand that this dark green goes behind the house and ends up here. I'm just dragging this paint over the background here as a wash, making it thin, and I'm also dragging some of it right up into the area of the houses, just to put some atmosphere there, almost like maybe the shoreline or in a bit of a fog. I have a good reference photo of the lobster boats. We took a lot of photos in that area, so I think with a few strokes here, I'll be able to create a more convincing looking boat. Before I add the reflections of the boat to the water, I think I'll work on the water down in this area. I'm mixing up my watercolor here. I'm changing it from this purple color to a little bit too red to more the color of the sky. Put the two reflections of the houses there. Now I'm going to take my brush and run it horizontally. It's a dry brush, just back and forth several times. This will give me a look of ripples on the water and also soften it at the same time. This lobster boat isn't moving, although it could be. Those ripples could be caused by the wind, it could be caused by the boat moving slightly, or it could even be caused by the man moving around in the boat, anything like that. But it just will add a little bit of focus and center of my interest. I'm going to take that light color and drag it down vertically. The back of this boat is reflecting the light colors. The front of the boat is in shadow. Again, I'll take a dry brush, pick up some of those colors I just put on there, that light wash of white, light tones, just pick those up. Well, the cabin of this boat would also have some reflections, and they would start about here. So I can pull those down this way. That cabin is a little bit lighter than the hull. So just drag my dry brush across this again. Pick up those light colors. Another highlight or two right on this boat. Really is sort of the center of interest. And some cerulean blue, and we'll make his pants a cerulean blue color. Maybe he's got overalls on. We'll put that blue up in there too. I worked on the lobster boat here, put a little more color in the man, and then I worked on some of the reflections down here. I added a few lobster floats here on the water. The water was fairly calm that morning that I painted, but I added some ripples in here. It gives it a nice linear feel. And I indicated a few boats back here as if this were a boat yard. And I added some boats here in the harbor. There's always more I could do with the painting, but at some point I just have to stop because I know my capabilities, and if I go beyond that, sometimes the painting gets worse rather than better. I did put a few more touches on it, but I think this will make a nice remembrance of our trip to Cape Porpoise, Maine. So now I'll sign it, varnish it, and we'll take a closer look.
All right, what do you want to know?
I want to know.
I got
Now, don't he look the part? No, that's beautiful.
My name is Sarah.
Just like a fish.
My husband, John
Daggett.
John Daggett.
Yeah.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.